Gentlemen, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
So we've got Deacon Will Nyce, Deacon Nicholas Blank, and Deacon Sean Koehr, and Deacon Edward Guillou. He is still in Europe. He's studying in Rome, but he's traveling in Spain. We're going to try to grab him another time. He escaped our clutches this time, but not next time. We'll get him. So what we wanted to do was introduce you guys to the diocese. Obviously, you're going to be ordained priests very soon here, and we wanted to give people a little bit of a window into who you are, as you're going to be spiritual fathers for us pretty soon here. So kind of getting into it, we're going to go around the table a little bit and just say, when did you first discern the priesthood, and then maybe what was kind of the final step that got you to go to seminary? Obviously, seminary is a period of discernment, but that's a big decision to decide to go to seminary. So we'll start here, Deacon Will. What was kind of that first sense of the calling, and then what made you finally go to seminary?
Sure. Well, I received my faith from some loving parents and had the great example of good priests in my life growing up at different important points in my life. But really the first thought of the priesthood came actually when I was in college, kind of a reversion to the faith, deeper life of prayer. And it was the example of a priest there, seeing him preach, seeing the confession lines grow longer, and a lot of grace that surrounded the parish. It just kind of clicked for me then. What really finally pushed me into seminary was a great experience I had in the Holy Land after college, getting to make a visit there, and then was really affirmed when I came back and was applying to the diocese and was able to work at a parish, at St. Veronica's Parish, while I was applying, and that was a wonderful experience. So,
Deacon Nicholas?
Yeah, I am. Ever since I was a boy, really, as an altar server, I've wanted to be a priest. I told my mom, who would take me and my siblings to daily mass. As a homeschooling family, we'd go, it seems, 2 weeks at a time, take a couple weeks off, 2 weeks again at a time, as much as a mom can endure with her children there.
Right.
And as an altar server, I was impressed with the priests I spent so much time with. I enjoyed being in the sanctuary. That desire certainly matured over high school and in college. And finally, I reached out to the vocation director when I was struggling senior year of college. Do I go to seminary or maybe do I take dating seriously and begin to move possibly in the direction of marriage? And it was the example of good dating friends, in fact, and one young man in particular who told me, he said, I think that as a father, as a husband, I need to love my wife sacrificially. I need to begin preparing for that as a boyfriend. And I realized as a boyfriend, I couldn't possibly be prepared to love sacrificially because my heart really felt called to the priesthood. And that's where I had to go begin testing this sacrificial love. And so I got in touch with the vocation director.
Who was the vocation director at the time?
It was Father Bashista.
Oh, very good. Mm-hmm. Very good. Deacon?
I think the foundation for my vocation was definitely in my family as well as in my high school, Seton School here in the Diocese. But I didn't really think about a vocation to the priesthood seriously until I met this priest, Father James Serby, a priest of Arlington, who would come and give retreats at my high school. And he was just the most joyful priest I'd ever met. And I was just really intrigued by what's the source of your joy? Why are you so happy? So I really took what he said seriously when he would come and preach. And one day I was meeting with him, and he just hit me with the question, you think God might be calling you to be a priest? And I reacted pretty strongly against the idea, but I think that was the first official calling. God was using him as an instrument there. And then when I got to college at the University of Notre Dame, I started to really develop a prayer life. And as soon as I started praying, God started speaking. And it came to the point midway through the first semester, I was reading this book called Gift and Mystery by John Paul II, and I just couldn't put it down. It was the first book I had ever read cover to cover in one sitting. I was totally enthralled with it. And when it gets to the part where he starts talking about what it's like to say Mass, I had a very powerful experience of joy and desire. And I said to myself, this is the most important thing a man could do with his life. And then that question kind of turned back on me. Oh, wait, maybe this is the most important thing I could do with my life. And that was a foundational experience. And I've just been pursuing that call ever since that I received freshman year.
And how in seminary do you kind of continue that discernment? How does it change? So obviously you discern to the point where you go to seminary. Everyone kind of treats it like, well, then you're going to be a priest. Well, it's really a further period of discernment. Obviously, you're open to it. Otherwise, you wouldn't go to seminary. But how does it change when you get to seminary? What is the kind of the shift in formation at that point?
Yeah, the church has steps along the way that she kind of affirms the call. So at the beginning, you're studying philosophy in some capacity, whether it's in kind of a college setting or for those that are coming to it a little bit later in a more intense philosophy setting. Then, there's steps along the way. You receive the ministry of lector, of acolyte, and then are made an official candidate for the diocese. And so you kind of see all of these steps as affirmations of the church that, no, this is the right path for you, because it's as much you kind of discerning this call within the church as this way that you will exercise your, baptismal priesthood in a specific mode, as the church saying, yes, this is a right fit. So it's kind of both of those things moving together.
Very good. Deacon Nicholas, how was it for you? What was the shift like?
Yeah, for me, I felt like I had done much of my discernment before seminary, in fact. So I came in very confident. I'm called to be a priest, and I'll be here for 6 years, and I'll be ordained. And then the middle of those middle years, second, third, fourth years, became very trying and difficult for me. And I finally asked Father Jaffe at the time, our vocation director. I said, "What's wrong? I don't feel called to anything but the priesthood, and yet I don't find peace here." And So what do I do? Because I think the trouble is just living as a Catholic man. This striving for holiness is difficult.
Right.
And he advised me, he said, finally, there comes a time, an important moment in seminary when a man says, I really feel truly that God's calling me to the priesthood. And instead of just thinking that's a real possibility, I will choose now that I will be a priest if the bishop will have me. And so at the end of my fourth year of seminary, is when I really decided I want to be a priest, and I'll proceed from now on as if I will be a priest. And peace came almost immediately as a great fruit of that decision. He warned me. He said, we can't have peace and restfulness until we make concrete and very practical decisions, and peace may follow or not. And so from that moment where I said, yes, I will be a priest, great peace has followed.
Yeah, and peace is a confirmation of any vocation or any, truly spiritual calling. I know that's perfectly, the case, and if you're called to be married, if you don't have peace with the person, that's a sign that something's not right here. It doesn't mean you're not meant to marry that person, but not now at least. There's got to be some discernment there. And you also made another point that I remember Bishop Burbage making on his podcast at one point. We were talking about seminary life and stuff. He says the church has to say yes too, the seminary, but it's just like when two people come together and get married, both have to say yes. The church, through the bishop and the individual, they both have to desire this. And that's reflected.
That's
in what
a great
said.
encouragement to us. I know.
Yeah.
There's someone saying yes. On the other side.
Yeah.
You're not just stumbling into it. Left to our own devices, who know where we'd end up, right? What about for you? What was that shift like?
Well, the first experience of the call was very emotional, and it was this high. I was on fire, and that really started to kind of level out. And I, through seminary, I've had many doubts whether this is God's call for me. But I think that God really was just wanted that fire to burn deeper, and with more peace, as Deacon Nicholas said. And I actually had the opportunity in the middle of my seminary discernment to go on a 30-day retreat, do the Ignatian exercises. And there comes a time at the end of the retreat where you really make what's called the election, where you based on your prayer with God for the last 30 days, you pick your vocation. And really it was based on, in the exercises it says, what is the best thing that you could do for the salvation of your soul and for the greater honor and glory of God? And it was just clear to me, the priesthood. And so that I made really an act of the will at that point. And again, after I made that choice, the peace just came.
Yeah, that's very good. One question I have is, I know a lot of seminarians, actually most, there's a priest who is really instrumental in their life, especially as they're discerning through seminary. I won't necessarily ask you who that was, but what is the best advice you've received from a priest leading up to your ordination here?
Really, it's tough because it's been the lived example that has been the strongest affirmation and encouragement, kind of the steadfastness in ministry, in always putting others before themselves, which is just Christ-like, a care for the flock, a desire to heal, to go out, to speak the truth, to preach. And so it's really been the sum total of that. Recently, though, one priest told me, and this was just an affirmation that I'll carry on for the next month. He said that there's no easy path to the altar, but it's worth every step. And so to hear an experienced priest say that, it's just an affirmation of what I've seen, but it's a good way to put it.
That's a beautiful image. Deacon Nicholas, what about for you?
Wow, yeah, for me, I guess more and more I'm coming to believe in the power of the Holy Spirit and realize how much I rely on God's grace and the Holy Spirit working. And so I think for me, it's a lesson I'm learning. I don't think I can say that I was told and I do it well now, but certainly be so radically open to the work of the Holy Spirit in your life, and trust that right now, as I stumble even through these final weeks of school, know that the Holy Spirit is working, and trust Him really with your whole life, and with great openness at every moment as you approach ordination.
Deacon Sean, what's been some of the best advice you've gotten from a priest leading up to this ordination?
It was actually, I got it yesterday. And he said to me that your security is in your poverty. And he just meant that the power of your priesthood, the fruitfulness that comes from your priesthood is from Jesus Christ. And it's not from relying on my own competence and knowledge. And when I actually lean too heavily on that, that's when I'm going to fail. And that's when I'm going to be insecure. And so I just, that really resonated with me.
Yeah. Deacon, I want to ask you, actually first, how many children were in your family?
I'm the oldest of 6 kids.
Okay, so this is a theme that I've noticed that I want to ask you guys about. You're the subject matter experts here. Deacon Nicholas, you're from 9 kids, right? And Deacon Sean, you're from 12, right?
Yes.
All right. So large Catholic families seem to produce priests. What do you think it is, Deacon, that is the reason for that? What maybe is different in a large Catholic family that seems to have men called to the priesthood?
Wow. For me, my experience has been, first, the witness, the constant fidelity of my parents, first to their own vocation to this life of marriage, but then also their witness of fidelity in living the Catholic faith. I remember my dad, he was our soccer coach. He coached all of us at some point, and every night we'd be at practice 5 nights a week, and every night as we drove home, it was the first we'd seen him that day. He's just gotten back from work, and he'd say, "Hey, have you guys prayed the rosary yet?" And often, "No, Dad, we haven't." So, all right, we got 25 minutes to get back home. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Let's get going here. As a kid, we were exhausted after practice, but certainly we grew to appreciate that for Dad, the faith was important. And then for my mom, taking us, as I mentioned, to Mass, it seemed every day. The day my friends in public school would say, "Oh, you're so lucky as a homeschooler, you don't have to wake up early. You can sleep in." I said, "Oh no, not my big Catholic family. We're up getting to 7 a.m. Mass, and then and the school day starts." So living the faith was something comfortable to me and to my family. So the possibility of the priesthood was never far from my mind. Maybe one of the greatest helps in my family was being the confirmation sponsor to some of my brothers, and then the sponsor, the baptismal sponsor, the godfather to my youngest brother. I was constantly aware as a high schooler and then as a college student of the small public eyes that were on me. Like this, my family, who looked at me as the oldest to witness faithfully the Christian life to them. And it wasn't a burden to me, but it gave me great focus as I made decisions all throughout high school and college. What will my youngest brothers, what will they think of this? What will they see in this? And I was already then being shaped into a priest, to have this awareness that the world they are watching. They expect to see holiness and goodness. And that will go a long way to forming even my younger siblings, and soon, hopefully, a parish, to striving for holiness by looking at the example of what God is doing in me.
Deacon Sean, your family has its own zip code with 12 of there. So what would you say? What you've known family. Obviously, there are priests that come from small families, only children and stuff. But it just seems to be something I've noticed. What would you say is kind of unique there that maybe brings priests about?
I think there's so many virtues implicit in that need to be present to raise a large family, and I just the power of my parents' marriage together, and it's amazing to see my dad, how much he loves my mom, and that's just an incredible witness to me. And just with my dad, I mean, it's his generosity. He's a very generous man, and my mom is just her sacrifice and long suffering and raising 12 kids. And it's just, you know, that the strength doesn't come from them. And my mom made that clear again, but by taking us to mass. Mass was super important in my family. I mean, my mom would take us to daily mass. My dad, Sunday mass, we'd all be in suits and ties. This was a very important thing. This is where we draw our strength from in our family. But also my siblings, my relationships and friendships with my siblings, especially my older sister Kelly, who she came back from Steubenville back when I was in high school, and she was just on fire and was a witness to the, you know, the power of the Holy Spirit, and taught me how to pray. And so really my relationships with my siblings was decisive in me responding to my call.
You mentioned your dad, so I have to ask. He had a great nickname for you. So he was generous, not just with his family, but with his nickname. What did he call you as a kid?
My nickname was Father Sean. So it stuck when I was younger. It didn't quite, well, I was about to follow me, but you know.
He's very perceptive, apparently.
Yeah.
Wise man. Deacon Will, you're from the baby family here, only 6 children in the family.
Yeah, people say, you know, oh, you're from a big family. I say, well, it depends on what circles you run in.
Yeah.
You know?
It's all about perspective. Yeah. So what was kind of different, do you think, for your family that really brought about that vocation for you?
Yeah, you know, I think like Deacon Sean said, so many kind of virtues are inculcated with a large family. You know, learning to put the common good ahead of your private good. You know, those are just some natural things that happen in a family. And then when your family has the faith at the center of their life, you see too that there's something supernatural that's really keeping you together, and everything good that you've received is from something that's greater. And so to be at the service of that is a great joy, and I think maybe that's part of what goes into the vocations coming out of a larger family.
And speaking of the topic of service, Deacon Sean, you were in the Navy and still have a commitment with them. Talk a little bit about that.
The Navy's been a huge tradition in my family. My grandfather was an admiral. All my uncles were in the Navy. My dad was going to be in the Navy until he broke his neck in a rugby accident.
Oh my gosh.
He's fine now. But,
okay, good.
But so military service has been a long tradition in my family, and I've always wanted to be a Navy pilot like my uncle.
Right.
And but as soon, you know, when I got to college, that was the dream, but I realized God had other plans. And as soon as I started pursuing the priesthood and kind of moving away from the dream to be a pilot, really the Navy came back in the picture, because I have a 4-year commitment to serve with them. So I'll get the priesthood and the Navy. And
wow.
So it's God really gives back 100-fold what you give up. So
that's wonderful. Deacon Nicholas, I heard an interesting story. So you used to work on the maintenance crew at St. Veronica's Parish. So talking about service, that was a obviously very service-oriented role. Talk a little bit about what maybe you learned from that's helped you.
Sure. No, it was a great experience. It was for about 8 months. Made some wonderful friendships, wonderful people that are there at the parish, and you know, you learn grace builds on nature. So you see the very baseline of the parish, the things that need to happen in order for the supernatural to happen. I learned a lot from Doug Munger, the maintenance manager who's there, and along with the whole staff. And there was always a battle. So I guess that's an analogy for the spiritual life. Is there's always another wall to be painted, another outside bricks to be spray washed. The battle every year that I've seen in parishes that I've visited since is the waxing and re-waxing of floors for the school building. You know, it takes a lot of steps, but
so you'll be a very understanding and compassionate priest as you knowing everything it takes to keep a parish running. This is obviously a very rocky time for the church. And this last year has been pretty rough, and you all have persisted. And what's amazing is that the fruits of the church are still there. Christ is still providing. We have 15 men in application for seminary, which is an amazing, amazing thing. But it's obviously, I would assume at least, it's taken its toll to some extent on the seminarians, and you're all each in a different seminary, so you've seen it in different ways. For a young man who's discerning the priesthood, he's discerning whether or not he's called to go to seminary. What would be your advice to them if they're feeling a little reluctant at the moment, just given everything that's going on? I'll kind of go around in reverse order. Deacon Sean, what would you say?
I would just use a line from that I heard from St. Jose Maria Escriva that said, "These crises are the crises of saints." And if you look through the church's history, there's been many, many crises, and great saints have arisen out of them. St. Francis, St. Ignatius, St. John Bosco. And so I just encourage them that, you're called to be a saint, and now's a better time than ever.
Wow, very good. Deacon Nicholas, what would you say?
Yeah, I think in every man's heart, there's a great desire to be a hero, to change the world, and yeah, that desire is pulling in my heart. The difficulty challenges me to come and lay down my life heroically in service of Christ and His church, and so I just tap into that desire, young man. See that desire, know that it can be fulfilled here.
Wonderful, Deacon Will.
Yeah, there's a lot of hope out there that people are looking for, and so there's kind of no more fertile ground to hear the gospel, to draw your strength from your vocation by, what it should all be about, which is that relationship with Jesus Christ. And so, if He's encouraging you, He established one church. The church isn't going anywhere. It's weeds and wheat until the end of time. He said that, and so. Here we are. It's the same church yesterday, today, and forever.
Wonderful. Last question. So people are obviously going to be wanting to pray for you as you lead up to your ordination, then obviously as you begin your ministry as priests. In terms of intercessory prayer, who is your patron saint that these people should be praying to you, to draw upon God's blessings? Who's your patron saint, and why did you choose him?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't the first book that I read, but I did read Gift and Mystery by John Paul II at an important time in my life. And John Paul II has been an awesome presence. I got to see him when I was pretty young, and then later in life getting to read him and then having him canonized not all that long ago. He's been an important part of so many of the priests who I admire. My father as well. He says he was a part of his kind of coming to the faith as well. So I hope to be, a man for others, which was what one of his definitions of the priesthood was. So
very good, Deacon Nicholas. Who would you?
Yeah, forgive me. He's not well known, but Blessed Stanley Rother was a priest from my seminary, Mount St. Mary's, who then became a missionary to Guatemala and was martyred there in 1981. He's a hero to all of us at the Mount. For me in particular, he witnesses a man who lays down his life, finally, very much like Christ, offering himself for the flock. But even before that, he was an incompetent seminarian. He was kicked out of one school, finally sent to the Mount, where he passed, but not with any impressive marks. Couldn't hold down a job, moved parish to parish for several years until finally he was sent to Guatemala. And I hope to imitate his trust in the Lord, in confronted with his own inadequacies, trusting the Lord to do kind of great things with him. And finally, his death shocks me, and yet inspires me to imitate it in some way as best I can as a priest.
Very good. Deacon Sean?
I'd say my patron saint is St. John Bosco, and I really admire his passion and zeal for the salvation of souls. He had this line that is really awesome. He would just say, "Give me souls, take the rest." And so that really inspires me as I go forward into the priesthood.
Very good. Well, gentlemen, we are all praying for you. We're sorry that Deacon Edward was not able to join us. Hopefully we'll get him on to answer some of these questions for us. But we're so grateful for your yes. We're so grateful for your diaconate ministry, but soon your priestly ministry. Thank you so much for your time here as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Billy.
Thank you very much.